The conference room lights were harsh enough to strip the warmth off every face. My slide deck was frozen mid-graph when my dad spoke, his voice calm in the way that hurts the most. "You're suspended until you apologize to your sister." Every sound in the room died. A pen stopped mid-stroke. A chair creaked and then went still. My sister tilted her head, pretending to look offended, but the small, smug smile, the one she tried to hide, said everything. She knew she had already won. No one stepped in. No one questioned it. No one even breathed differently. I pressed the remote again. Click. The slides didn't change. And instead of defending myself, instead of breaking the silence like I usually did, I simply said, "All right." They thought that was surrender. They didn't know it was the beginning. If they had understood what that single word would unleash, they would have stayed silent for once in their lives, not out of fear, but out of respect. I grew up in a house where silence was marketed as harmony, but in reality, silence was just hierarchy with better lighting. My sister was the spotlight. I was the drywall behind it. Everything she did was amplified. Everything I did was absorbed quietly into the structure of the family. When my mom was still alive, she was the buffer, the soft landing between my father's blind spots and my sister's constant elevation. She noticed things no one else did. The way my shoulders tensed when I felt unseen, the nights I stayed up finishing projects, the quiet effort behind every achievement. But she passed too early. And with her went the only counterbalance that kept our home from tilting. After that, the favoritism wasn't subtle, it was policy. The moment I received my acceptance letter, the one that should have changed my life, I held it with both hands like a future I'd earned. My dad skimmed the first line, nodded once, and set it on the counter like it was a dentist reminder card. 10 minutes later, my sister walked in with an engagement ring. By nighttime, the house was full of champagne glasses and phone calls. My acceptance letter was buried under party napkins before the night was over. That was the day I learned that in my family, accomplishment meant less than spectacle. And it was the first hint of a truth I would spend years ignoring. I was only valuable when I made things easier for them. My childhood was a long list of proofs that my sister's comfort ranked higher than my existence. When she cried at school over a group project disagreement, my dad rushed in before the teacher even finished explaining the situation. She left with new supplies and a pat on the head. I left with the same poster board and a reminder: be the reasonable one. Reasonable became my role before I ever agreed to it. And my sister learned something early. If she performed enough fragility, the world would bend for her. When my family started the business, the division of labor was clear. My sister handled relationships. I handled everything else, which meant building the development department from a flickering room into an actual team, writing all the schedules, managing every deadline, fixing every disaster, carrying every unrealistic promise my sister made. My dad's mantra never changed. She knows the client, you'll figure out the rest. And I always did. Nights blurred into mornings, my team stayed late under blue computer halos, and I stayed later, smoothing the cracks my sister created with her confidence. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for recognition. I just documented everything. Not out of spite, out of survival. Because deep down, I knew one day they would ask for proof of the work they'd spent years refusing to see. The breaking point arrived as quietly as every other injustice I tolerated. My sister promised a 4-week timeline on a project that needed 12. My dad approved it without ever seeing the numbers. When I pointed out the impossibility, he gave me the same look he used when I was a child asking for fairness. Patient, dismissive, confident I'd adjust myself to fit whatever shape he needed. But something was different this time. This time, I didn't feel disappointment. I felt clarity. Clarity that I had spent a lifetime being reasonable for people who never intended to see me at all. The memo by the elevator announced it clearly. My sister's name sat at the top of a department I built. My name wasn't on the chart at all. Not oversight, erasure. My phone buzzed with messages from my engineers. Are you okay? Do we still follow your timeline? There's a lot being said upstairs. My dad called too. Not to ask how I was feeling, but to ask if I understood the optics. Just apologize. Family comes first. Minutes later, my sister appeared at my door without knocking. You can end this. Just apologize. She looked in the reflection of my monitor, not at me, and smiled, certain she had already won. But inside me, something subtle and solid shifted. Not anger, not grief, a door clicking shut. For the first time, I didn't negotiate. I didn't defend. I didn't shrink. I simply stood up, closed my laptop, and began. I closed my office door, and it felt like the first boundary I'd ever drawn. My office suddenly looked foreign, like a room decorated for someone else's accomplishments. I tied my hair back, a small gesture, but grounding. I opened my drawer and began packing. Not in panic, not in spite, in precision. I gathered contracts, risk assessments, midnight notes, budget breakdowns, emails, every timeline I'd ever repaired. It wasn't a revenge plan. It was a record of reality, one they had refused to look at. Then I drafted my resignation letter. Short, calm, undeniable. The real work came next. I assembled a full project documentation file, a mirror, not a weapon. I sent it to the board, the department heads, the clients. Subject line: project documentation and status overview. No accusations, no commentary, just truth. My phone started ringing within 60 seconds. I didn't answer a single call. The next morning, the conference room was packed. My dad, my sister, the company lawyer, a paralegal. I walked in with my portfolio and sat it on the table. I'm here to finalize my resignation. The lawyer inhaled sharply. My sister's face drained of color. My dad tried to regain control. You don't have to do this. I slid the letter across the table. Then the documentation. The lawyer opened it and his expression collapsed. This is extensive. My sister leaned over his shoulder. You can't send this to clients. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look up. I already did. My dad's voice cracked. You blindsided us. I met his eyes. No, I revealed what you ignored. The lawyer cleared his throat. Legally, she acted within her rights. My sister sputtered. So she gets to walk away after ruining everything? I closed the portfolio gently. I'm not ruining anything. I'm just done absorbing the cost. My dad tried one more time. We need you for the Hamilton account. Your sister didn't understand the requirements. He stopped, too late. My sister snapped toward him, betrayed. But I was already standing. This isn't my problem anymore. I walked out. No theatrics, no backward glance, just freedom. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter, as if shedding something heavy I'd carried for years. At home, Cooper, my dog, trotted across the hardwood floor, nails tapping softly. The simple sound felt grounding, human, mine. I placed my portfolio on the table and poured a glass of water. I held it with both hands, the same way I used to hold coffee during long nights fixing my sister's messes. Except now it was quiet. Not suffocating, not expectant, just clean. The next morning, I got dressed without rushing and drove to the meeting with the company I once turned down out of loyalty. Their office was bright and open, a different world entirely. No tension, no hierarchy disguised as harmony, no expectation that competence meant servitude. When they introduced me to the team, people shook my hand with genuine interest. Not comparison, not suspicion, just a respect. Standing by the window afterward, looking over the city, I thought about the acceptance letter buried under party napkins, the endless late nights, the years I spent shrinking so others could feel bigger. Leaving wasn't a loss. It was an opening. A doorway I walked through with nothing but truth and the refusal to keep carrying what wasn't mine. For the first time in years, the silence around me felt like freedom. Silence isn't surrender. Silence is a doorway, a place where you choose what enters and what never will again. Walking away didn't break me. It returned me to myself. If you've ever stood in a room where your worth was treated like background noise, let my story be a reminder. You don't need their permission to change your life. If this story resonated with you, stay close. There are more stories worth telling. Stories that might remind you of your own strength.